Hello and welcome to the Dash Money YouTube channel. For this first video, entitled From Chicken and Egg to Closing Loops, we'll begin with a short 2-minute clip from Mr. Ryan Taylor speaking about the chicken and egg problem and crypto adoption. This is from the 2017 Bitcoin conference. This will help set the scene for the ideas and new perspective that I hope you'll gain from this video. So please enjoy.
But I think that there's actually two main reasons why we're not seeing widespread use of cryptocurrencies. The first is all cryptocurrencies face this chicken and egg problem. Merchants don't want to accept a form of payment that very few customers use, and customers don't want to use a payment system that hardly anybody takes. And on the surface, it seems like a really hard problem to solve, and it is. But it has been solved before, and it's been solved before in financial services many times. So I think it's a wise idea to look at, well, what are those adoption factors, and how do we stack up against them? And the proven solution to the chicken and egg problem is the following. You need payments that are faster, easier, and more secure than the alternatives, and you need to provide switching incentives. And you usually do this within a confined ecosystem. So how does cryptocurrency stack up against these criteria? Well, Bitcoin and virtually every other cryptocurrency uses long cryptographic addresses, takes 10 minutes to confirm. On all three dimensions, we're falling short. And so it's no wonder that consumers have not adopted cryptocurrency. These are the rules, and we're breaking them. And I also think that the second issue is just usability. If you look at the early internet, this is the first browser, dominated by text and hyperlinks, maybe a couple of pictures. Compare that with the internet of today. It's rich, interactive, customized to you. And we would never go back and switch to that picture on the left once we've experienced this. Almost every cryptocurrency wallet looks something like this. And I don't know about you, but I think it looks a lot like that. It's not a rich experience. It doesn't deliver information that's relevant to me. I have to wait for the blockchain to sync before I can use it. Unless I want to use a centralized service where I hand my Bitcoins off to somebody else, this is my experience. And it's a pretty bad one. We're 8 years in. The question is, what is this going to look like in the future? It isn't that. I promise you.
Mr. Taylor gave that presentation over 5 years ago, and everything he said about adoption, requiring ease of use, speed, security, and switching incentives, as well as a rich user experience, all remain true to this day. But have we seen the adoption and impact that was hoped for, accomplished by any crypto? In this video, I want to offer a new understanding that will explain why, and reveal how I think adoption for Dash can finally move forward. But to do this, I must first introduce a new perspective on an old topic, and that's why we will begin with a discussion on networks. Now for this, we'll be using networks in an abstract sense, because a key point in my argument is that something vital was lost in the shift to decentralized networks. So I just want to reemphasize that this is an abstraction, just to illustrate a point. So if you're willing to suspend your disbelief for a short time, you can understand this idea. So to begin, I want to make the argument that in crypto, and actually any network on the internet, there are actually two networks. The real-world network, where there are people and users, and the internet network of hardware and software. So with crypto or blockchain, you understand the internet side. There are miners and service nodes that maintain the decentralization. But what does the real-world network look like for crypto and blockchain? This is what I want to explore. But before we get there, let's first take a look at an example of a centralized network. So we'll first look at centralized networks in our two network abstract, and then we'll come back to the decentralized. So let's get into it. So in this representation, the nodes or black circles in the real-world network are the users, and the large black hole in the internet network is the centralized entity, so it could be a business or anything else. So in this configuration, the users are the value, and the centralized entity controls the value of the network. Now this is not inherently bad, as we'll see in the next slide. As you can see, the users get to interact with each other, and that provides value for the users, and it is an efficient design for the centralized entity, but there is a catch. The connections that the users experience with other users is actually all through the centralized entity. So this is why when people think of networks, they usually think that there's only one network. But this is only because it's by design of the central entity. So in the centralized network, where the users are value, if the user gets to connect with other users, what does the centralized entity receive from the relationship? Well, the centralized entity, to minimize the cost to the user and thereby reduce friction of adoption, will mine and sell metadata or user data and sell ads. So really this is just the internet as we know it today. But now this is where things change. So what happens when the value and the control are inverted? What I mean is, so instead of the users being the value and the centralized entity having control, the control and the value switch sides in our two network abstract. Now, during this, the users have control of the value and the network is the value, and there's no longer any centralized entity. So let's take this understanding and finally get back to what a decentralized network looks like in the two network abstract. So we're going to take the centralized network and transform it into a decentralized network and finally find what was lost. So let's first remove the centralized entity. Done. Alright, now let's replace the internet network with the miners and service nodes in our decentralized network. And we have decentralization, but the transformation is not yet complete.
There, and now we can see what was lost in the shift to decentralized networks. The users are no longer connected. This is why I argue that no crypto has achieved mass adoption, because they must first recapture the user network, and that must be done at the peer-to-peer level and on-chain.
So we have completed the shift to where the users control the value and the network holds the value, but let's take a closer look at the real-world network for the crypto users and see if we can find a way to replace what was lost, the connection between the users. Well, this is what we have. So there is something more to each of the users, but they're still not forming a network. Let's break down what one of these single users are actually doing. So the input to each of the users is a transfer of value to the user from an exchange or from the block reward. Now the block reward is included as coming from outside the network because it is from the inflation of the supply and not a peer-to-peer exchange on the network. The blue dot is the user, and the output from the user is the transfer of value to the exchange or converted fiat. Now I have not differentiated between centralized or decentralized exchanges because it doesn't really matter. The value is still leaving the network and it is not a peer-to-peer interaction. I will add one caveat because I would be remiss if I left it out. So if you ask, was the blockchain or crypto ever not like this? And the answer is yes. Back before 2017, Bitcoin actually had a network that was peer-to-peer with on-chain transactions, but the small blocks, big block wars occurred and the small block won. The Bitcoin small blocks protected their decentralizations, but destroyed the user network. One could even say that the legacy of what this network once was is the source of most of its value today, but it has lost the user network. So my one caveat is over. Now let's look at a few other scenarios of users to help illustrate the point of what a user is doing in the current real-world network, decentralized networks. So in scenario A, we have what one might call the current Bitcoin user network. The users are different sized based on the amount of Bitcoin they have, and they mostly hodl with the whales playing on exchanges. This is one strategy. If you're not going to reconnect the users, you're just going to have to grow, make the users bigger so they hold. With scenario B, money transfer service. So if somebody sends money back home, it's not much, but it is an on-chain peer-to-peer transaction, but it ends there. And the last scenario, scenario C, is a privacy coin exchange. I only want to illustrate this because of the fruitlessness of privacy. When the exchanges can see all the inputs and outputs, it doesn't really matter if they can't see the network exchange. Well, now I think we have a thorough understanding of what we have with the decentralized user network. So now for an easy question. What is it that we want for the real-world network? Something like this. Something that can grow even larger and more complex.
But what I want to emphasize is the closing of the value flow in the network, or simply closing loops and not open loops. But as you can see, there are still on-ramps and off-ramps because it's not a closed system, but an open system, and people can free to leave or enter as they choose. So this closing of loops is done on the peer-to-peer level and not in a centralized way, and it's done in the wallets. So when you send and receive, it's done on-chain, and you're actually sending and receiving Dash. There's also one more thing that's important, and that's that the control of the value remains with the user, and it's not given away to the connection between the users or stored in the connection. You may be thinking to yourself that I'm taking a swipe at Lightning Network, but I digress. So, bringing it all together. The two-network abstract representation of a decentralized network. Now for a hard question. How do we get there? Or how do we get here? How do we get to a decentralized network and the users are still connected to one another? So this is where I have a divergence with Mr. Ryan Taylor. Because if you remember, he spoke about merchants and consumers. And I think he's starting too far downstream. I have a metaphor for what I mean. The metaphor is he's starting too large with a large multicellular organism. We need to go back. We need to scale it down. We need to start smaller. We need to start at the peer-to-peer level, or to put it another way, at the cellular level. So the cell, like the individual user, is the smallest completely functional unit, and that is why the connections need to start there, and the network will grow from there. So how do we get back there? Or how do we get there? Well, I don't think we're just going to integrate into current systems. We first have to make our own connections and systems and have our own networks with its own users. But Dash is already planning for this, and we are finally, I'm finally at the last two pieces of information from this video. So we can finally close the loop on closing loops. Yeah, I'm going to leave that there. So the first of the two things is called Dash Platform, and you can think of it as the backend. So Dash Platform runs on top of the decentralized network. And ever since Mr. Ryan Taylor gave his presentation back in 2017, Dash has been working on this solution. Now, it's taken a while, but it takes time to get things done right. Now, the Dash platform discussion is outside the scope of this video, but if you're watching this video, I trust that you can internet well enough, and there's tons of information on Dash.org. So if the Dash platform is the backend working on top of the decentralized network, what is making the connection between the users? What is the front end? This is the Dash apps, or the Dash decentralized applications. So what are these Dash apps, you may ask? Well, the first Dash app is DashPay, and it incorporates usernames, contacts, and payments. It's kind of like the most basic thing if you want to connect people together. It's what you would expect from any modern application that you have on your phone today, or if you want to say another way, it's like Venmo. But DashPay is not the only dApp, it's just where it starts, and Platform is where any dApp can run on top of and anyone can build on. There are also dApps being worked on by the Dash Incubator that anybody can work on and get paid. These dApps include Dash Jimby, which is a Twitter alternative, Dash Patreon alternative, Dash Messenger dApp, Dash Strawpoll dApp, and much more. So you've seen how Dash will close the loops in the flow of value and how it can blaze a new path forward. And if you have made it this far, I'll tell you a little bit more about some of my dApp ideas, because I think it could be interesting. Now, these are pretty rough ideas, but here we go. So the first is Dash Get Paid, because if we have a Dash Pay, there ought to be a way to get Dash Paid. So Dash Get Pay. And the second is Dash Cashier. So for the Dash Get Paid app, this one, think of it facilitates an internet marketplace. It is not an internet marketplace. So it's just something where it connects the seller and the buyer. So think of this as a asymmetric or guerrilla warfare integration. So like on Craigslist or on Facebook Marketplace or something, there might be in the ad description #Bob on Dash Get Paid, and that way you can connect the buyer and seller, but you're not actually building out the whole platform. So it just connects the buyer, and then you can include a seller rating on the dApp, and maybe if there's going to be shipping the product, they might include the buyer's address. Now this is a little unorthodox for some, but this is crypto, so do what you want. And even if other platforms were to ban it, well, you can wear that as a badge of honor because it validates the use case. And then if you want to go on from there to build it out, this is just something I think that is a must as a dApp. The second is the Dash Cashier. So this one's different. So this one, just imagine you're going to walk into a place where you're going to eat, and the way you check in is you jump on the Dash Cashier, and the restaurant you're in, you check into the restaurant, and then you pull up their menu, and you can order from their menu. And then there might be a screen where you can see where you've placed the order, and once you've paid, essentially it places you in line. And then in the back, the cooks can see that, oh, hey, this person placed this order, and essentially you're removing the cashier from the entire, or the server from the entire payment stream. So with this one, essentially kind of like creating a new business model. Now I know it's not brand new, but like it could be a new way to do it. So really, just a little bit more on this. I just want to illustrate it because I don't think payment cards, which are essentially credit cards and debit cards with crypto backends, those are not the future. They're not peer-to-peer, essentially just using the legacy system. And neither is the interaction with people scanning screens and using QR codes. I think it needs, the most with QR codes is maybe scan a menu, but it needs better usability. And you can just build this into the wallet, and entrepreneurs will come if you just give them the tools and they'll use it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you think I picked on Bitcoin too much, or I've seemed to have left out the smart contract platforms, left them unscathed, I had to constrain this presentation for coherency. But soon I will eviscerate those smart contract platforms. That will be on the first law of money video that I have planned for the third episode of Dash Money. I will add one caveat, and that is that the Dash platform is still being finished. It's on testnet and will be released. It's planned for the fourth quarter of 2022. But I put this video out to help inform people and hopefully bring developers and builders in to help create the dApp space for the platform, so we have lots of use cases when the platform is released. So thanks for listening to my video. I hope you're able to get some information and value from it. If you want to take some of these ideas and make them your own, please do. Share, get it on Twitter. I think this is really just for the Dash community, see where we can go. And I'll put out a new video next week. So until then, y'all be good, and let's make Dash money.